You wake each morning to a dozen demands already waiting. Messages accumulate while you sleep. Colleagues, clients, family members, all certain that their need justifies immediate claim on your time. You pride yourself on responsiveness, on being the person others can count on, always available, perpetually accommodating. Yet you're exhausted. Despite working longer hours than you can sustain, you accomplish less of what truly matters. Your days fragment into 1,000 small pieces, each too brief for serious thought or meaningful progress. You reach evening depleted, having been busy every moment yet unable to point to genuine achievement. Here's what no one has told you. Your accessibility is destroying your effectiveness. Every time you drop everything to handle someone's unformed question, you train them to bring you unformed questions. Every instant response to non-urgent communication establishes that you're perpetually on call. You've become a slave to others' priorities, while your own highest work remains perpetually postponed. This is not virtue. This is a trap you've constructed through years of saying yes when you should have said no, of making yourself cheap through excessive availability. But here's the liberating truth. You can stop. You can reclaim sovereignty over your time, your attention, your capacity to contribute at your highest level. The transformation begins the moment you recognize that the man who is everywhere is ultimately nowhere, while the man who guards his presence carefully commands respect, attention, and genuine influence. When you stop being accessible to everything, you finally become available for the thing that matters most. 1. The illusion of indispensability. The modern professional has convinced himself of a most pernicious delusion, that his worth correlates directly with his availability, that to matter he must be perpetually accessible, instantly responsive, universally accommodating. I tell you that this is a fantasy, as dangerous as it is common. The man who makes himself constantly available declares himself worthless. Understand this paradox clearly. When you can always be found, you need never be sought. During my tenure as First Lord of the Admiralty, I observed Commander James Sterling, a brilliant tactician, devoted officer, conscientious to a fault. He insisted on personally approving every requisition, attending every briefing, reviewing every dispatch that crossed his desk. His door stood perpetually open. His subordinates learned they need not think. Sterling would handle it. This seemed admirable. It was catastrophic. When pneumonia confined him to bed for 3 weeks, his absence created initial chaos. Papers piled up. Decisions waited. But within days, something remarkable occurred. His junior officers discovered they possessed judgment he'd never allowed them to exercise. They made decisions. They solved problems. They developed capability. Upon Sterling's return, he found himself superfluous. The machine ran perfectly well without him. His constant availability had rendered him unnecessary. You see, accessibility is not generosity. It is training. Training others that your time has no value, that they may interrupt thoughtlessly, that they need not prepare before approaching you. Every time you drop everything to address someone's unformed question, you teach them to bring you their unformed questions. Every time you respond instantly to non-urgent communication, you establish that you're perpetually on call. This pattern reveals a deeper truth about human nature. People value what they must work to obtain. The merchant who gives away his goods destroys his market. The leader who gives away his time destroys his authority. Scarcity creates value. This is not cynicism, but recognition of how human beings actually function in the world. But here's the peculiar thing. Your compulsion to be available reveals not dedication, but insecurity. You fear that, if invisible for even brief periods, you'll be forgotten. This fear makes you cheap. It makes you replaceable. The truly consequential person doesn't worry about being forgotten because his contributions speak louder than his presence. Consider this diagnostic test. If you cannot disappear for a week, Without crisis, you have failed. Not failed to make yourself important, failed to build systems, failed to develop people, failed to create genuine capability. Your constant presence prevents the growth of those around you. They remain dependent because you've trained them to remain dependent. The illusion of indispensability is precisely that, an illusion. You are not indispensable, but you could be valuable. The distinction is crucial. Indispensability suggests the world cannot function without your constant intervention. Value suggests you contribute something distinctive that elevates outcomes. The first is a trap. The second is worth pursuing. Begin today. Identify one obligation you will decline, one boundary you will establish, 1 hour you will guard from intrusion. It will feel uncomfortable. It should. You're breaking patterns you've spent years establishing. Those patterns served your need to feel needed, not others' genuine needs. Let them break. When you stop being accessible to everything, you become available for the thing that matters. This is not selfishness. This is the first step toward genuine contribution. How accessibility destroys authority. Authority requires distance. This is not opinion, but observable law, as immutable as those governing economics or physics. When you eliminate all distance through perpetual availability, you destroy the space others need to invest you with authority. The commanding officer who drinks nightly with his troops discovers he cannot command them when crisis comes. General Sir Hubert Gough commanded Fifth Army in the Great War with an accessible style he believed enlightened. He visited forward positions regularly, shared rations with common soldiers, maintained no reserve or mystique. His men liked him immensely. When the German spring offensive of 1918 shattered his lines, his orders met hesitation. Soldiers questioned commands because they'd grown accustomed to dialogue, not directive. The familiarity he'd cultivated worked against him. Contrast this with Field Marshal Haig. He maintained measured distance, sufficient humanity to remain approachable, sufficient reserve to remain authoritative. His troops didn't particularly like him, but they obeyed instantly. In crisis, Haig's distant authority proved more valuable than Gough's familiar popularity. You must understand the mechanism at work here. Authority exists in the space between you and others. When you collapse that space through constant accessibility, you eliminate the psychological room others need to regard you as authoritative. This isn't about being cold or remote. It's about maintaining appropriate reserve. Think of the Roman emperors. They appeared in public rarely, but with ceremony. When they did appear, their presence carried weight precisely because it was scarce. The emperor who wandered the streets daily, chatting with every citizen, would have destroyed the gravitas necessary for his role. This is not ancient history, but timeless truth about human psychology. The modern executive makes this error constantly. His door stands perpetually open. He responds to every email within minutes. He makes himself available for every trivial question. Then he wonders why his directives lack force, why his words carry no weight. He has trained his organization that he is always accessible, always interruptible, always willing to engage with the trivial. Every casual interaction, every trivial exchange, every moment of accessibility that isn't purposeful erodes the authority you've built. Not because these interactions are inherently bad, but because they're abundant. What's abundant becomes worthless. When your presence is guaranteed, your absence cannot be felt. Here's what happens in practice. The leader who explains every decision extensively invites endless debate. Each explanation signals that his authority is provisional, subject to approval. Sometimes the appropriate response is simply, "This is the decision." Not harsh, not cruel, but final. The confident leader explains when explanation serves understanding, but doesn't require unanimous approval before acting. This applies beyond formal hierarchy. The parent constantly available becomes background noise to the child. The teacher perpetually accessible loses the respect necessary for genuine instruction. The friend who drops everything for every call discovers his counsel carries less weight than the friend who guards his time carefully. You see the pattern. Authority and accessibility exist in inverse proportion. As one increases, the other necessarily decreases. This is why strategic inaccessibility is not arrogance, but necessity. You're not inflating your importance. You're maintaining the conditions necessary to be effective in your role. Begin implementing this today. When you make a decision, announce it clearly with sufficient explanation for understanding. Then stop. Resist the urge to over-justify or seek approval. When someone challenges the decision, acknowledge their concern briefly and reaffirm, "I've considered that factor. The decision stands." Notice how this changes the dynamic. Your words carry more weight because you're not diluting them with endless accessibility. The transformation begins when you recognize that measured distance enhances rather than damages your relationships. Quality of engagement matters more than quantity of contact. A quarterly substantive conversation often creates more real connection than daily trivial exchanges. When you guard your accessibility carefully, people prepare more thoroughly when they do approach you. The interactions become more valuable for both parties. Authority serves a purpose. It allows you to lead, to influence, to guide effectively. When you destroy that authority through excessive accessibility, you don't become more democratic or egalitarian. You simply become ineffective. The choice is yours. Reclaiming your sovereign hours. Sovereignty consists in the power to determine your own priorities and allocate your resources according to your judgment. When you surrender your time to universal accessibility, you have committed the equivalent of political colonization. Others now govern your most precious territory. Let me explain what I mean by sovereign hours. These are blocks of time that are absolutely yours, unclaimed by others, defended as zealously as a nation defends its borders. Not stolen moments between obligations, but deliberately protected periods during which you do your most important work. During the war, I established an inviolable rule. From 9 to noon each morning, unless German bombers were overhead or invasion imminent, I worked undisturbed in my study. No ministers, no secretaries, only the work requiring my fullest mental capacity. My staff initially protested, "But what if the war cabinet needs you? What if intelligence arrives? What if the Americans telephone?" I remained firm. Those 3 morning hours, when my mind was fresh and my judgment sharpest, were reserved for strategic thinking, for writing the speeches that would rally the nation, for wrestling with problems that admitted no quick answers. The result? I accomplished more in those protected mornings than most men accomplish in full days. When I emerged at noon, I had clarity and energy for all the meetings, calls, and crises that filled the afternoon and evening. This is the first principle of sovereign time. Identify when your mind works best. Most people do their finest thinking either in early morning, when the mind is fresh and undistracted, or late evening, when the world is quiet. You must discover your peak hours through honest observation. For 1 week, note when you feel most mentally sharp, when complex problems seem solvable, when writing flows easily. This pattern reveals your sovereign hours, but identifying these hours means nothing without the fortress mentality necessary to protect them. You don't negotiate with invaders, you repel them. Every request for these hours must meet the highest bar, genuine emergency that only you can address, and that cannot wait. Establish clear protocols. Phone off, door closed. Assistant instructed to redirect all but true emergencies. Physical and technological barriers matter. Here's what you must ask each morning before your sovereign hours begin. What is the one thing I could accomplish in the next 3 hours that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Answer this question in writing. Commit to it. Let nothing divert you until it's done. The cascade effect of this practice is remarkable. When you accomplish your most important work during sovereign hours, Everything else falls into place more easily. You enter the rest of the day with genuine progress rather than perpetual catch-up. This creates momentum and confidence that affect all other activities. Understand what protecting 3 sovereign hours actually does. It makes the other 13 hours far more effective. You're not sacrificing productivity by protecting this time. You're maximizing it. The concentrated work of protected hours produces results impossible to achieve in fragmented time. But I must warn you, implementing sovereign hours will feel uncomfortable initially. You'll think of all the urgent matters you're neglecting. You'll experience guilt about being inaccessible. This guilt is the voice of your old patterns reasserting themselves. Acknowledge it, then ignore it. Others will test your boundaries. They'll claim their matter is exceptional, genuinely urgent, absolutely requiring your immediate attention. Hold firm. The moment you make exceptions, just this once, you've destroyed the practice. Your boundaries must have principles, not just preferences. Starting tomorrow morning, establish your first sovereign hours. Choose 3 consecutive hours when you typically have mental energy. Inform those who might interrupt. Between 6 and 9 a.m., I'm unavailable except for genuine emergencies. I'll be fully accessible after that. Set up your environment. Close door if possible, or clear departure from communal spaces. Turn off your telephone ringer. Disable notifications. Have paper and pen for your morning question. When you sit down at the start of your sovereign hours, write, "The one thing I must accomplish in the next 3 hours is," then do only that. Don't check messages. Don't handle quick requests. Don't get distracted by easier tasks. For 3 hours, you have one job. Do this daily for 2 weeks. Observe the transformation in both the quality of your work and your sense of control over your life. You will have begun reclaiming sovereignty over your most precious resource, your capacity for concentrated thought and meaningful accomplishment. This is not theory. This is practice. Begin today. The scarcity principle in human relations. Every schoolboy learns that scarcity creates value in markets. Gold commands higher price than iron because it's rare. Diamonds cost more than water despite water's greater utility. Yet we persistently refuse to apply this immutable principle to human attention and presence. The scarcity principle operates just as powerfully in human relations as in economics. When you make yourself scarce when your time cannot be assumed, your attention cannot be claimed casually, your presence cannot be guaranteed, you necessarily become more valuable. This isn't manipulation. It's recognition of how human psychology actually works. People treasure what they cannot easily obtain. They dismiss what comes without cost. This is not cynicism, but realism about human nature. When a man speaks seldom, others lean forward to hear him. When he speaks constantly, they learn to tune him out, secure in the knowledge that he'll speak again tomorrow, and the day after, ad infinitum. Lord Rothermere, the press baron, maintained an intriguing practice during my years in politics. He never attended social gatherings unless he genuinely wished to be there, regardless of the host's importance or the potential for useful connections. His peers attended everything, desperate to be seen, to network, to curry favor. Rothermere appeared perhaps once quarterly at major events. The result? When Rothermere did attend, his presence was noted, discussed, valued. Hostesses competed for his acceptance. His few words at these rare appearances carried more weight than the endless chatter of those who attended everything. He had recognized what others hadn't. Perpetual absence made occasional presence valuable. The man who is everywhere is ultimately nowhere. The man who appears rarely is remembered. Consider the mechanics of this principle. In human attention, as in economics, abundance destroys value while scarcity creates it. Every additional moment of accessibility you provide reduces the value of all moments. When you're always available for meetings, each individual meeting means less When you respond instantly to every communication, each response carries less weight. The presumption problem compounds this effect. When people can assume your availability, they've already devalued you mentally. They approach you casually, interrupt without hesitation, make claims on your time without preparation or consideration. But when your accessibility cannot be presumed, when they must request, justify, prepare, they approach with respect and purpose. You must apply scarcity strategically. You cannot be equally scarce to everyone about everything without becoming ineffective. Strategic scarcity means identifying where scarcity creates maximum value. Be highly accessible to your children but scarce to casual acquaintances. Maintain open channels with your closest colleagues, but barriers against random interruption. Think of how you currently distribute your presence. You probably say yes to most meeting requests, respond quickly to most communications, accept most social invitations. This universal accessibility has trained others to devalue your time. They bring you unformed questions because accessing you costs them nothing. They interrupt casually because you've established you're always interruptible. Here's what happens when you implement selective scarcity. For the next month, default to declining rather than accepting. When invited to a meeting, social gathering, or any commitment of time, your initial answer is, "Let me check my priorities and respond tomorrow." This pause serves multiple purposes. It signals your time isn't freely available. It gives you space to evaluate whether this commitment truly warrants your presence. It trains others that your acceptance cannot be assumed. During that pause, ask 3 questions. Can only I provide the value this situation requires? Will attending this serve my highest priorities? Can I give full presence if I attend, or will I be distracted? Only if all 3 answers are yes do you accept. When someone requests a meeting, respond, "What specific question needs my input? Can you frame it in writing first?" Half the time, writing clarifies their thinking enough that the meeting becomes unnecessary. The other half, you arrive prepared to provide immediate value rather than wasting time on preliminaries. This systematic application of scarcity will dramatically reduce your commitments while increasing the value of those you keep. Your presence becomes an event rather than an assumption. People prepare more thoroughly because accessing you requires effort. The interactions become more meaningful because both parties have invested in making them so. The accusation will come, "You're being difficult. You're creating bureaucracy. You're not a team player." This accusation reveals they preferred when they could claim your time without preparation or justification. Hold firm. You're not being difficult. You're establishing appropriate standards for a precious resource. Social proof amplifies scarcity's effect. When you're selectively accessible, others notice. Your scarcity itself becomes a signal of your value, creating a reinforcing cycle. People think, if he guards his time this carefully, it must be valuable. This makes them value the access they do get even more highly. Begin implementing this today. Identify one category of accessibility where you've been too abundant, perhaps social invitations, professional networking events, or casual coffee meetings. For the next 2 months, attend only half of what you would normally accept. Observe what you discover. Do people value your presence more when you do appear? Do the events you skip matter to your actual goals? How do you feel with the reclaimed time? In nearly every case, you'll discover your influence and relationships don't suffer. Instead, your engagements become more meaningful, your presence more appreciated, and your time more valuable. This provides empirical evidence that scarcity enhances rather than diminishes your value. The choice is yours. Continue flooding the market with your presence, or recognize that scarcity creates value in human attention just as surely as it does in every other domain of existence. Your attention is capital, not currency. The fundamental error in modern thinking about attention is treating it as currency, something you spend daily and expect to be replenished nightly, like water from a well. But attention is capital, a finite store that, once depleted, cannot be fully restored. The man who wakes each morning assuming he has infinite attention to distribute treats his most valuable asset as worthlessly as a spendthrift treats his inheritance. He scatters it across 100 small demands, believing he can simply generate more tomorrow. This is delusion. I watched Lord Beaverbrook operate with ruthless attention discipline during the war when I brought him into government to manage aircraft production. Each morning, he identified the 3 decisions requiring his personal judgment, typically bottlenecks in production, conflicts requiring ministerial authority, or strategic choices with long-term implications. Everything else he delegated or ignored. His staff initially resisted. "But, Minister, what about these 50 other matters?" His reply never wavered. "If there are still problems tomorrow, bring me the 3 most important. The rest will solve themselves or prove they didn't matter." Within months, aircraft production doubled. Beaverbrook had recognized what others hadn't. His attention was capital to be invested in highest return opportunities, not currency to be distributed across every demand. Those 3 daily decisions, receiving his full mental capacity, produced more value than attempting to address 50 partially. Let me explain the mechanism. Unlike currency, attention capital doesn't refresh completely with sleep. Each time you fragment your attention across trivial matters, you deplete your capacity for deep thought. The effect is cumulative. A day of shallow, scattered attention leaves you less capable of profound thought the next day. A week of fragmentation creates mental habits of superficiality. Track your deep work capacity, how many hours of sustained, focused thought you can achieve. If it's declining over time, you're depleting capital. This is the canary in the coal mine, warning you that your attention practices are unsustainable. Just as investors calculate return on financial capital, you must assess return on attention investment. I call this ROAI, return on attention investment. An hour spent in strategic planning may yield benefits for months. An hour answering routine emails yields no lasting value. Before committing attention to any task, estimate its ROAI. Ask, 1 month from now, will I be glad I invested this hour here? If the honest answer is no, reallocate ruthlessly. This single question can transform your attention allocation. Attention invested wisely compounds. Reading a substantive book builds knowledge you'll draw upon for years. Writing a thoughtful memorandum clarifies your thinking and influences others long after it's written. But superficial consumption, scanning headlines, attending pointless meetings compounds in the opposite direction, training your mind for shallowness. You must manage attention like a portfolio. Just as prudent investors diversify their holdings, you must allocate attention across different categories. Some to urgent matters, yes, but also some to important but non-urgent work, some to learning and development, some to relationships. Each week, before allocating time, decide your attention portfolio. X% to strategic work, Y% to execution, Z% to learning. Then defend these allocations as zealously as you'd defend a financial investment. This week, conduct your first attention audit. Get a notebook, track, in 15-minute increments, where your attention actually goes for 3 days. Be brutally honest. Record every email check, every brief interruption, every meeting, every task. At the end of 3 days, categorize each block. Category A, high-value work requiring deep thought. Category B, necessary execution requiring moderate attention. Category C, trivial consumption. Calculate the percentages. Most people discover they're spending less than 20% of attention on Category A, while 70% or more vanishes into Category C. This is capital depletion. You're spending principal on consumption rather than investing it for returns. Now plan next week differently. Allocate at least 40% of your attention to Category A work, no more than 40% to Category B. Reduce Category C to 20% maximum. This requires saying no to many current commitments, but the shift from depleting capital to investing, it will be immediately evident in the quality of your work and the clarity of your thinking. The most common error is treating urgent as synonymous with high return. Urgency is often inversely related to genuine importance. Responding to every urgent demand feels productive, but depletes capital on consumption rather than investment. Another mistake, believing you can attend to everything if you just work longer hours. This ignores capital depletion. More hours of scattered attention don't equal more capacity. They equal more depletion. When you begin treating attention as capital, you'll face pressure to return to spending it as currency. Others have grown accustomed to casual claims on your attention. When you restrict these claims, they'll accuse you of being unavailable or uncommitted. This is precisely when your resolve matters most. Capital discipline requires consistency. The moment you make just this once exceptions, you've destroyed the practice. Others learn that pressure works, and you'll face constant testing of your boundaries. After implementing this capital framework, you'll fundamentally reconceive your relationship with attention. You'll stop thinking, "How can I fit everything in?" and start thinking, "What deserves investment of my irreplaceable capital?" You'll recognize that your previous scattered, reactive attention patterns were slowly bankrupting you, leaving you exhausted yet unaccomplished. You'll see that the fatigue you attributed to overwork actually stems from capital depletion through worthless consumption. Most powerfully, you'll now have a framework, ROAI, attention portfolio for making allocation decisions without guilt. When declining a request, you can say honestly, "I've allocated my attention, capital, elsewhere." This isn't an excuse. It's recognition of economic reality. Your attention is the most valuable asset you possess. Treat it accordingly. Invest it strategically. Protect it zealously. The returns will be evident in everything you accomplish. Chapter 6. The distance that commands respect. Authority requires space, psychological distance between you and those you would lead, influence, or guide. When you collapse this distance through constant accessibility, through excessive familiarity, through the elimination of all formality or boundary, you destroy the very thing you're trying to build. The Romans understood this profoundly. They called it gravitas, weight, seriousness, authority. It requires both substance and distance. You must have genuine capability, certainly, but that capability must be perceived through appropriate distance for it to command respect. During my first tenure as First Lord of the Admiralty, Admiral Sir John Fisher served as First Sea Lord. Fisher maintained what junior officers called Olympian distance. He rarely appeared in the Admiralty building's common areas. He conducted business through formal memoranda. He granted audiences only by appointment for substantive matters. This seemed excessive to some, even pompous. But when Fisher made decisions or issued directives, they were executed without question. His reserve had created psychological space that others filled with respect and obedience. Compare this to his successor, Admiral Sir Henry Jackson. Jackson prided himself on being accessible, maintaining an open door, chatting casually with officers of all ranks. His directives were debated, delayed, sometimes quietly ignored. The difference wasn't competence. Both were brilliant naval minds. It was distance. Fisher's reserve had created the space necessary for authority. Jackson's accessibility had eliminated that space, reducing his authority to mere suggestions among equals. You see the mechanism at work. The more familiar you become through casual interaction, oversharing, excessive accessibility, the more your authority erodes. Not because familiarity makes people disrespect you personally, but because it removes the psychological space necessary for formal authority. Think about your own professional relationships. Where have you collapsed appropriate distance? With direct reports, are you so accessible that they bring you every small decision? With peers, have you become so familiar that your professional input lacks weight? With those you lead indirectly, do they treat your guidance as suggestions to be debated rather than direction to be followed? The solution requires conscious recalibration. Preserve distance in formal contexts, even if you're more casual in informal ones. Your subordinates may know you enjoy fishing, but in the boardroom, you're still the executive, not the fishing companion. You need not share every thought, doubt, or deliberation. Others don't need to see your internal process, only your conclusions and direction. This opacity isn't dishonesty. You're not hiding failures or pretending infallibility. You're simply recognizing that people follow those who appear to possess clarity they themselves lack. Here's the paradox worth understanding. Appropriate distance often creates deeper connection than constant proximity. When you're always available, interactions become superficial. When access is limited, both parties invest more in the time they have. A quarterly substantive conversation with measured distance often creates more real connection than daily trivial exchanges. Begin examining your current professional relationships. Identify where you've collapsed appropriate distance. With direct reports, set specific meeting times rather than constant availability. Require them to prepare written proposals rather than casual questions. With peers, be more selective about informal socializing, more formal in work contexts. With those you lead, reduce explanation, increase expectation of execution. The implementation is physical and behavioral. Control when and how you're accessible. Maintain appropriate formality in professional contexts, even if you're casual personally. Stop over-explaining or over-justifying your decisions. The discomfort you feel doing this is the distance being created. That distance is necessary. The greatest mistake is confusing distance with coldness or cruelty. Measured reserve isn't about being harsh or uncaring. It's about being purposeful in how you engage. Some roles genuinely require more accessibility and less distance, but most roles require more distance than we currently maintain. When you begin creating appropriate distance after years of excessive familiarity, those affected will resist. They've grown comfortable with excessive access and will call your new boundaries unfriendly or suggest you've changed. This is their adjustment problem, not your error. Hold firm. Authority serves a purpose. It allows you to lead, to influence, to guide effectively. When you destroy that authority through excessive accessibility, you don't become more democratic. You simply become ineffective. The choice is yours. Continue collapsing distance and wondering why your words carry no weight, or create the space necessary for genuine authority. Chapter 7. What Exile Taught Me About Influence. Between 1929 and 1939, what history calls my wilderness years, I experienced political exile. Cast out from cabinet after the Dardanelles disaster and later choices, I spent a decade largely ignored by those in power. My warnings about the German threat were dismissed as warmongering. My counsel was sought by almost no one. These years, which appeared as professional death, became my most valuable education. I learned that forced inaccessibility, when properly used, build strategic reserves impossible to accumulate amid constant engagement. In 1931, after losing my seat in the shadow cabinet, I faced a choice. I could spend my exile in resentment, constantly scrambling for relevance, offering opinions on every passing issue to remind people I existed, or I could use the time differently. I chose differently. I withdrew to Chartwell, my Kent estate, and began writing my biography of the Duke of Marlborough, my distinguished ancestor, 4 volumes, over 1 million words, exploring military strategy, coalition warfare, political leadership, across years of conflict. My former colleagues thought I'd become a gentlemanly historian, removed from serious politics, but I was building intellectual capital. When 1940 came, and Britain needed a prime minister who understood strategy, coalitions, and sustained conflict, I possessed depth of understanding that those who'd remained in office dealing with daily crises but never stepping back for study could not match. My wilderness had been preparation. Forced withdrawal revealed what voluntary withdrawal never would. That influence exerted rarely but powerfully exceeds influence diluted through constant availability. During those years, my warnings about Hitler, issued from the backbenches without office or inside information, carried more moral weight than they had when I held cabinet position. Why? Because I had nothing to gain politically. I wasn't positioning for office or playing factional games. My words came from conviction, not calculation. People listen differently when you speak from conviction rather than calculation. When you have no immediate stake, no political advantage to gain, your authenticity becomes your authority. This reveals something crucial about strategic withdrawal. It's not abandonment of the battle, but preparation for it. The general who conserves his forces is not abandoning the field. He's positioning himself for decisive engagement. The statesman who guards his time and attention is not shirking duty. He's ensuring that when duty calls him to his highest purpose, he'll have the energy, clarity, and moral authority to answer. You cannot control when opportunity arrives. You can only control whether you're prepared when it does. My wilderness years aligned preparation with eventual opportunity perfectly, not through my foresight, but through my commitment to building capability during exile. If you're currently experiencing any form of professional or social diminishment passed over for promotion, excluded from key decisions, marginalized in your field, resist the impulse to fight for immediate relevance. Instead, design your wilderness curriculum. What capabilities would make you uniquely valuable when circumstances shift? Perhaps deep expertise in an emerging field, perhaps historical understanding of your domain, perhaps skills in an area everyone else is neglecting. Commit substantial time weekly to building this capability. Simultaneously, maintain selective visibility on issues where you have genuine moral authority. Speak not to regain position, but because truth demands it. Keep your interventions rare and substantive, rather than frequent and desperate. This combination, deep preparation plus selective voice, positions you perfectly for the moment when the wheel turns, and it will turn. Circumstances always shift. The question is whether you'll be ready. Document your learning. Write substantively about what you're discovering. This builds both capability and reputation as a serious thinker rather than a political opportunist. The primary error is wallowing in bitterness about your wilderness rather than using it productively. Resentment consumes the very energy you need for preparation. Another mistake, building capabilities that interest you but have no application to your ultimate goals. This is escape disguised as preparation. Wilderness can become comfortable. The absence of daily combat, the freedom to study these, can seduce you into avoiding the eventual return to the fray. Remember, you're preparing for decisive engagement, not permanent retirement. After understanding this principle, you can reframe any current diminishment entirely. What feels like failure or exile becomes potential preparation time. The sting of being overlooked or excluded transforms into opportunity for building capabilities others cannot match. Your current isolation is not an ending but a chapter in a larger story, one where withdrawal becomes preparation for decisive return. The transformation begins when you choose to use forced inaccessibility as strategic advantage rather than mourning lost relevance. Chapter 8. Building Strategic Reserves in Isolation. The difference between wasted isolation and productive preparation lies in what you build during the interim. I call these accumulations Strategic reserves capabilities, relationships, knowledge, and resources developed during periods of reduced visibility that become decisive advantages when circumstances shift. Strategic reserves aren't random acquisitions, but deliberate investments aligned with your ultimate purpose. During my wilderness years, I built 4 types of reserves, each proving essential when crisis came. First, intellectual capital. Historical knowledge and strategic understanding developed through writing the Marlborough biography. While others managed daily political crises, I studied centuries of military strategy and coalition warfare. This depth proved immediately valuable when I assumed leadership during our greatest crisis. Second, material resources. Financial independence through writing. I couldn't be controlled through economic pressure. I could speak truth regardless of consequences because I'd secured my material foundation. Third, political relationships, maintained carefully, despite exclusion. I kept contact with key figures, not through obsequious flattery, but through substantive engagement when it mattered. These relationships survived my political exile. Fourth, moral authority, earned through consistent warnings others feared to voice. By the time war came, I had established standing to speak hard truths because I'd never compromised that standing through convenient silence. Lawrence of Arabia provides another instructive example. After his extraordinary success in the Arab Revolt, he faced his own wilderness in the 1,920 seconds, ignored by the military establishment, his warnings about Middle Eastern policy dismissed. He could have spent these years in bitterness. Instead, he joined the Royal Air Force as an enlisted man under an assumed name and used the isolation to write 7 Pillars of Wisdom, one of the century's great works on warfare and leadership. Simultaneously, he developed friendships with writers, artists, and thinkers outside political circles. When the next Middle Eastern crisis emerged, Lawrence possessed both refined strategic thinking and access to influence networks that made him indispensable despite his formal obscurity. His wilderness had been systematic preparation. You must audit your current reserves in all 4 categories. For intellectual capital, what knowledge do you possess that distinguishes you? What skills have you mastered? Intently, what skills have you mastered? What understanding have you developed through experience? For material resources, what financial independence do you have? What tools or infrastructure do you control? Can you speak truth, even if it costs you your current position? For relationship networks, who would help you if you had nothing to offer them? Who values you beyond your current position? These are your real relationships, distinct from mere professional contacts. For moral authority, what stands have you taken at cost to yourself? What principles have you defended consistently? Moral authority isn't claimed. It's earned through demonstrated integrity over time. This inventory reveals where you're strong and where dangerously vulnerable. It often reveals that current position is masking fundamental weakness in actual reserves. Use this assessment to prioritize your building efforts. The most valuable reserves are those you control independently of anyone else's permission. I built financial independence through writing, intellectual capital through study, moral authority through consistent principle. These couldn't be taken away when political winds shifted. Prioritize reserves that belong to you personally over those dependent on institutional position. Skills over titles, knowledge over credentials, personal reputation over organizational affiliation. Like financial investments, strategic reserves compound. Each book I read informed the next. Each article I wrote deepened my thinking. Each relationship I maintained led to others. Design your reserve building to compound. Don't learn randomly. Follow threads that connect and deepen. The worst-case preparation principle matters here. Build reserves, assuming you might need them in circumstances far worse than current reality. I prepared during the 1,930 seconds as if Britain might face existential threat, which seemed paranoid until it proved prescient. Ask yourself, what capabilities would I need if circumstances deteriorated dramatically? Then build those reserves, even if they seem excessive for current needs. Better to have strategic reserves you don't immediately need than desperately need reserves you didn't build. Over the next 3 months, systematically build reserves in all 4 categories. For intellectual capital, commit to reading 1 substantial book per week in your field, taking detailed notes, writing brief essays on key insights. For material resources, reduce expenses, increase savings, build financial buffer that could sustain you through extended crisis. For relationship networks, identify 12 people whose friendship would be valuable regardless of your position. Commit to substantive contact with each quarterly. For moral authority, identify 1 issue where you can take a stand based purely on principle, even at cost to your immediate interests. Speak or act on it publicly. The most common error is confusing credentials with capabilities. Having an impressive title isn't a strategic reserve if it depends entirely on someone else's continued approval. Build reserves you control. After implementing this framework, you possess concrete categories for productive use of any period of reduced visibility. Building strategic reserves isn't preparing for hypothetical disaster, but ensuring capability for actual opportunity. Every month spent building reserves is a month of increasing rather than depleting your strategic position. Chapter 9. When accusations confirm your right. The moment you begin implementing strategic inaccessibility, the moment you establish boundaries, protect your time, create distance, decline demands, you will face accusations. You'll be called selfish, arrogant, aloof, unavailable. These accusations are not signs that you're wrong. They're confirmation you're threatening comfortable assumptions. The person accusing you has grown accustomed to presuming upon your time, to treating your availability as their entitlement. Your new boundaries force them to confront that they never actually had right to unlimited access. They just assumed it. Their anger reveals their previous presumption. When I began warning about Hitler in the early 1932s, while my fellow conservatives pursued appeasement, the accusations were vicious. I was called a warmonger, a has-been seeking relevance, an alarmist manufacturing crisis. The Prime Minister himself suggested my speeches were irresponsible. For years, I stood nearly alone, isolated, accused, dismissed. But I recognized something crucial. The intensity of the accusations was proportional to how uncomfortable I was making people. If my warnings had been irrelevant, they would have been ignored. If they'd been easily dismissed, they would have drawn mockery. The fact that they provoked such strong defensive reaction revealed I was striking at truths others desperately wanted to avoid. The accusations, properly interpreted, confirmed I was right to persist. This pattern repeats with strategic inaccessibility. When you establish new boundaries, others' reactions reveal their previous assumptions. Mild disappointment suggests they respected your autonomy all along. Anger or accusations suggest they'd come to view your availability as their right. Interpret intense negative reactions as evidence you've been allowing inappropriate claims on your time. The stronger the resistance, the more they'd been presuming upon you, the more necessary your boundaries. Accusations often reveal the accuser's issues more than yours. When someone calls you selfish for protecting your time, they're revealing their belief that your time belongs to them. When they call you arrogant for maintaining distance, they're revealing their expectation that you should be constantly accessible to validate their worth. Listen to accusations for what they reveal about the accuser's assumptions, rather than accepting them as accurate assessment of your behavior. This isn't dismissiveness. It's understanding that projection is common. Apply the consistency test. Are these same people applying these same standards to themselves? Do they make themselves perpetually available? Or do they reserve their own time while demanding yours? Often you'll find the loudest accusers are those who guard their own boundaries carefully while expecting you to maintain none. Most resistance to your new boundaries is temporary. People adjust. After initial protest, they learn to respect your time because they must. Weather the first 2 weeks of any new boundary without wavering. Most resistance peaks immediately, then fades as new patterns establish. If you retreat during peak resistance, you ensure it recurs. You've taught them that accusations work. Hold firm through the initial storm and watch it dissipate. When you next face accusation about your boundaries, employ this response framework. First, acknowledge briefly without apologizing. I understand you're disappointed. I'm not available for X. Second, reaffirm your boundary calmly. I've made a different decision about how to allocate my time. Third, offer appropriate alternative if one exists. I can address this via written memo, or my colleague handles such matters. Fourth, end the conversation rather than defending endlessly. I appreciate your understanding. Then, disengage. Do not over-explain, justify extensively, or seek their approval. Your boundary is not subject to their approval. Maintain your boundary consistently afterward. If you cave to pressure once, you've taught them that accusations work. The primary mistake is interpreting all resistance as indication you're wrong. Most resistance is others' adjustment to necessary change. Another error, becoming defensive or aggressive in response. Defensiveness suggests doubt about your boundaries. Aggression suggests you're making this about power rather than principle. The correct response is calm, brief reaffirmation without extensive justification. Some accusations will come from people you care about or respect. This makes them harder to dismiss. Remember, even good people can have bad expectations about your availability. After mastering this framework, you can maintain newly established boundaries despite social pressure. You possess interpretive lens that allows you to see accusations as confirmation rather than condemnation. You understand that others' temporary discomfort is acceptable price for your permanent effectiveness. You recognize you don't need everyone's approval of your boundaries. The boundaries exist to serve your highest work, not to win popularity contests. You can now weather accusations without the guilt or doubt that previously made you retreat. The same pattern repeats reliably. Establish boundary, face resistance, hold firm, watch resistance fade. This knowledge makes each successive boundary easier to maintain. The transformation is complete when you can decline a request without guilt, protect your time without apology, and maintain your standards without doubt. Chapter 10. The sieve system for filtering demands. Every demand on your time must pass through deliberate filters before reaching your personal attention. Without these filters, you become a human sorting station, spending your valuable attention deciding which demands deserve your valuable attention. This is catastrophic waste. By 1941, as Prime Minister directing a global war, I faced information and demands that could have consumed 24 hours daily. Every theater of war, every ministry, every allied leader, every military service, all had urgent needs requiring immediate prime ministerial attention. I would have drowned attempting personal response to everything. Instead, I implemented strict filtering. My principal private secretary received all incoming thousands of items daily. He personally handled routine matters according to established policy. Important but non-urgent items went to relevant ministers with notation to inform me of outcomes. Items requiring coordination across ministries went to the War Cabinet Secretariat. Only items meeting strict criteria reached my desk. Decisions only I could make. Information only I needed personally, or matters of such strategic importance that I must engage directly. Result: I saw perhaps 20 items daily, each genuinely deserving my attention, while thousands of other matters were handled appropriately without consuming my capacity for strategic thought. The sieve system requires 3 levels of filtration. First level handles routine according to established procedures. No judgment needed, just policy execution. Second level handles important matters requiring judgment, but not your personal judgment, capable lieutenants empowered to decide. Third level, you handles only decisions requiring your unique perspective, authority, or capability. Map your current demands and honestly assess how many actually require you personally. Build your filters accordingly, with clear criteria for each level. Make these criteria explicit rather than leaving them to intuition. An item reaches you only if it meets at least one of 3 tests. First, only you possess the knowledge, authority, or relationships to address it effectively. Second, it will have consequences beyond 6 months or affects strategic direction. Third, it represents genuine crisis, requiring immediate top-level attention. Everything else belongs at lower filter levels. Train your filters to apply these criteria consistently rather than defaulting everything to you. When items do reach you through the filters, they should arrive refined, stripped of extraneous detail, distilled to essential decision points, with options already analyzed by competent staff. Your time is spent deciding, not sorting through raw information. If something requires 2 hours of your time to understand, it hasn't been properly prepared. Instruct your filters to provide decision-ready packages, not raw data dumps. The sieve system requires monitoring and adjustment. Items that shouldn't have reached you reveal filter criteria need tightening. Important items handled at lower levels but handled poorly reveal need for different filters or better training. Weekly review what reached your desk versus what was filtered. Adjust criteria and clarify authority at each level based on what you learn. The system improves through this feedback loop. Starting this week, implement a basic sieve, even if you have no formal staff. First level, establish automatic handling for routine matters. Set up email filters for newsletters, notifications, routine communications. Batch process these weekly rather than responding individually. Create template responses for common requests. Second level, identify one colleague, assistant, or family member who can field requests requiring judgment, but not your personal judgment. Give them clear authority and criteria for what they handle versus escalate. Train them on your priorities and decision framework. Third level, create your personal criteria for what reaches you. Write them down explicitly. When requests come in, apply these criteria before engaging personally. For next month, track everything that consumed your attention. How much was actually first-level routine you shouldn't have touched? How much was second-level delegable? How much genuinely required you? Use this data to refine your filters. The most common error is filtering too little, retaining personal involvement in matters others could handle because you don't trust their judgment. This reveals need for either better training or better people at filter levels, not your continued involvement in minutiae. Another mistake, filtering inconsistently. If you handle something personally one time, people learn to bypass your filters by bringing matters directly. Route everything through the sieve consistently. Implementing filters means letting go of control over many decisions. Some will be made differently than you would have made them. If they're not catastrophically wrong, leave them. Perfect consistency is less important than preserving your capacity for strategic thought. After implementing the sieve system, you experience profound relief. The constant overwhelm lifts. You can actually reach the end of items requiring your attention. Your decision quality improves because you're addressing fewer but more important matters with full mental capacity. You prove to yourself that effective filtration doesn't mean things fall apart. It means things get handled at the appropriate level. This evidence makes it easier to extend and refine the system. You've moved from being reactive processor of constant demands to strategic allocator of your scarcest resource. Chapter 11. The Art of Strategic Presence. Strategic inaccessibility requires its complement, strategic presence. When you do choose to be accessible, when you do engage, when you do give your time, this must be done with such full attention, such complete engagement, that it justifies all the times you were not available. Partial, distracted presence is worse than absence. It disappoints without accomplishing anything of value. You cannot justify inaccessibility by providing mediocre accessibility when it occurs. During the war, I held weekly meetings with my chiefs of staff, the military commanders of all services. These meetings could have consumed entire days of discussion, debate, and deliberation. Instead, I arrived having read all relevant papers beforehand, having formed preliminary judgments, prepared to make decisions. The meetings averaged 2 hours. During those 2 hours, every participant had my complete attention. No interruptions accepted, no side conversations, no distractions. I listened intently, questioned sharply, decided firmly. The chiefs left with clear direction and confidence that their time had been valued and well used. Compare this to other ministers whose meetings meandered for hours while they read papers for the first time, handled interruptions, or conducted side conversations. Their longer meetings accomplished less because presence was diluted. My shorter meetings accomplished more because presence was complete. Never enter important engagement without preparation. Read relevant materials beforehand. Consider what you hope to accomplish. Identify your key questions or contributions. Clear your mind of other matters. For any meeting or conversation you've deemed important enough for your personal presence, invest preparation time at least equal to the engagement time itself. If it's worth an hour of your presence, it's worth an hour of preparation. This principle alone transforms the quality of your engagements. During engagement, deploy specific practices that signal and ensure complete attention. Physical. Face the person directly. Maintain eye contact. Eliminate all competing stimuli. Close your laptop. Silence your telephone. Shut the door. Mental. When your mind wanders to other matters, note it and deliberately return attention. Verbal. Demonstrate your listening through specific references to what others have said. Treat each engagement as if it's the only thing happening in your world during that time, because during that time, it should be. A 30-minute meeting with complete presence outperforms a 3-hour meeting with partial attention. Don't let meetings drift. Keep them focused and purposeful. When the purpose is accomplished, end the meeting. People value their time being respected more than they value your extended but diminished presence. Begin each engagement by stating its purpose and expected duration. When purpose is achieved, conclude promptly rather than filling remaining time with trivial discussion. This respect for time, yours and theirs, enhances rather than diminishes the relationship. How you end engagement matters as much as how you conduct it. Summarize decisions made or insights gained. Specify next actions. Thank participants for specific contributions. Leave them with clear sense that something was accomplished, not just time consumed. The final 5 minutes of any important engagement should crystallize value created and path forward. For your next important meeting, implement this full protocol. 3 hours before, review all relevant materials and note your 3 key objectives. 30 minutes before, clear your workspace and your mind. At start, state, I've blocked the next hour specifically for this. Let's ensure we address X, Y, and Z. During the meeting, every time you're tempted to check your phone or let your mind drift, physically refocus, sit forward, make direct eye contact, ask a clarifying question. If the meeting accomplishes its purpose in 40 minutes, end it then. At conclusion, summarize. Here's what we've decided. Here's who's responsible for what. Here's our next touch point. Watch the difference in how people respond compared to your typical meetings. They'll leave feeling the time was valuable, that they had your full attention, that something concrete was achieved. The primary error is confusing physical presence with full presence. Sitting in a meeting while mentally elsewhere isn't presence, it's attendance. Another mistake. Preparing inadequately because you assume you can figure it out in the moment. This wastes others' time while you catch up. Full presence is mentally exhausting. You cannot maintain it for 12 hours daily. This is precisely why you must limit your commitments so the ones you keep can receive your genuine attention. After mastering strategic presence, you discover you can accomplish in 1 hour what previously took 5. More importantly, people respect and value your time differently when you demonstrate this level of preparation and focus. Your reputation shifts from always available but scattered. The quality of your professional relationships improves because every interaction becomes meaningful rather than merely one of many forgettable exchanges. Strategic inaccessibility, combined with complete presence when engaging, creates far more value than universal accessibility with scattered attention. Chapter 12. Training others to value your time. Others will value your time to precisely the degree you demonstrate it's valuable. If you treat your time as cheap, immediately available, freely given, requiring no justification, they will treat it likewise. But if you treat your time as precious, carefully allocated, requiring preparation to access, given purposefully, they will rise to meet this standard. You're constantly training people in how to treat you, whether you realize it or not. Every time you accept a meeting request without asking its purpose, you train people that your time requires no justification. Every time you respond instantly to non-urgent communication, you train them that you're permanently on call. The good news, you can retrain them through consistent application of higher standards. Lord Beaverbrook, whom I brought in to manage wartime aircraft production, was renowned for this discipline. When someone requested a meeting with him, his secretary would ask, "What specific decision or information do you need from the minister? Can you frame it in writing first?" Half the requests would disappear the requester, realizing they could solve it themselves or didn't actually have a clear question. The other half would arrive written, thoughtful, specific. Beaverbrook's meetings averaged 15 minutes because the preparation had refined the question to its essence. Meanwhile, other ministers spent hours in meetings where participants hadn't thought through what they needed, using the meeting itself to organize their thoughts. Beaverbrook had trained people to access his time, prepare thoroughly. When someone requests your time, never grant it immediately. Even if you intend to say yes, impose at least one step between request and agreement. Ask, "What do you need to accomplish in this meeting?" Or, "Can you send me a one-page summary of the situation first?" This serves multiple purposes. It filters those who haven't thought through their request. It gives you information to decide if meeting is warranted. And it trains people that your time requires justification. Develop standard questions you ask every time someone requests your time. Apply them consistently. For meetings you do accept, require preparation from participants. Send me your analysis and 3 proposed options by Thursday so I can review before we meet Friday. This ensures your meeting time is spent on decision and discussion, not basic information transfer. It also ensures participants have invested their own thought before claiming yours. Make preparation a precondition for access. No preparation, no meeting. Stop responding instantly to non-urgent communications. Even if you have the answer readily available, wait. Respond to emails once or twice daily at set times, not continuously. Return calls on your schedule, not within minutes of receiving message. This trains people that you're not perpetually available, that your attention operates on your schedule, not theirs. Establish specific communication windows and train people to expect responses within those windows, not immediately. When people waste your time through poor preparation or unclear requests, there must be consequence. Not punishment, but natural result. The meeting ends when time is wasted. future requests from that person receive greater scrutiny. Access becomes less readily granted. If someone arrives unprepared, end the meeting politely but firmly. Let's reschedule when you've had time to prepare properly. This teaches that wasting your time carries cost. Starting tomorrow, implement this 3-step protocol for all meeting requests. Step 1. Acknowledge the request but don't immediately agree. Let me understand what you need first. Step 2. Ask for written clarification. Can you send me a brief email outlining A. What decision or information you need from me, B. What you've already considered or tried, C. What you propose we accomplish in our time together. Step 3. Review their response and then decide whether meeting is warranted or whether you can provide what's needed via email or whether they should take another approach first. For those meetings you do accept, respond. I'll meet with you for 30 minutes on specific time. Please send me specific preparation materials by specific deadlines so I can review beforehand. Then hold these standards. If they arrive unprepared, end the meeting. If they send unclear requests, ask for clarification rather than trying to decode it yourself. Within 2 weeks, you'll notice change in how people approach you: more thought, better preparation, clearer requests. The greatest mistake is inconsistency. If you enforce standards sometimes but cave, when someone pushes back, you've trained them that pushing back works. Another error: being rigid about process but flexible about standards. The process serves the standard. Don't mistake implementing the process for achieving the standard. Some will accuse you of being difficult or creating bureaucracy. This accusation reveals they preferred when they could claim your time without preparation or justification. Hold firm. After successfully training others to value your time, you experience dramatic shift in the quality of your professional and personal interactions. People arrive prepared. Questions are clear. Meetings are purposeful. The constant sense of having time wasted lifts. More subtly, but equally importantly, you gain respect. People recognize that someone who values their own time highly is likely to value others' time as well. The training works both ways. As you raise standards for accessing your time, you become more thoughtful about claiming others' time. The overall effect is a more professional, more effective environment where time is treated as the precious resource it actually is. Chapter 13. Discovering your one essential contribution. All the boundary setting, all the filtered accessibility, all the protected time. These mean nothing if not directed toward your genuine purpose. Strategic inaccessibility is not an end but a means. It creates the conditions necessary to identify and execute your one essential contribution. That work only you can do. That unique synthesis of your capabilities and circumstances that would not exist without you. Most people never ask this question clearly. They spend their lives responding to others' priorities without ever discerning their own highest purpose. In May 1940, when I was finally called to form a government, I understood with perfect clarity what only I could contribute. Not administrative competence, others possessed that equally. Not political skill, many were more adept at consensus building. What I uniquely offered was the willingness to speak unpalatable truth, the historical understanding of what Britain faced, the rhetorical capability to rally a despairing nation, and the strategic vision to see path to victory when victory seemed impossible. These capabilities, developed during my wilderness years when I had time for deep historical study and was forced to speak truth without political calculation, intersected precisely with Britain's need in that moment. Had I spent the 1,930 seconds scrambling for immediate relevance rather than building these capabilities, I would not have been ready. Your essential contribution must draw on capabilities you possess that others largely don't. These aren't necessarily your credentials, but your actual capabilities. perhaps unusual combination of experiences, perhaps depth of understanding in specific domain, perhaps relationships or access others lack. List honestly what you can do or understand or access that most others in your field cannot. Don't be modest, but don't confuse credentials with capabilities. This inventory identifies your raw material. Your contribution must address real need, not imagined importance. Many people pursue work they find interesting while ignoring whether anyone actually needs it done. Examine your domain, your industry, your community, your sphere of influence. What genuine needs exist that are currently unmet or poorly met? Be brutally realistic about whether these needs are real or simply your projections. Your essential contribution lies where your unique capabilities intersect with genuine need. Not what you can do generally, but what you uniquely can do that genuinely needs doing. Map your capabilities against the genuine needs you've identified. Where do they intersect? This intersection points toward your essential contribution. Often it won't be what you expected or what seems most prestigious. Apply the would it exist test. Your essential contribution should be something that, absent your engagement, would likely not happen or would happen far less effectively. If someone else could do it equally well, it's not your essential contribution. Keep searching. Over the next week, conduct this discovery exercise methodically. Day 1. Write your unique capability inventory. Spend several hours examining your full career and life experience, identifying what you can do or understand that's genuinely unusual. Day 2 and 3. Assess genuine needs in your domain. Talk to colleagues, read industry analysis, observe what problems persist despite attention. List needs that are both important and currently poorly addressed. Day 4. Map capabilities against needs. Draw literally capabilities on one axis, needs on another. Mark intersections. Day 5 and 6. For each promising intersection, apply the would it exist test. Be ruthlessly honest. Day 7. Write a one-page statement. My essential contribution is specific work, because specific intersection of unique capabilities and genuine need. This becomes your North Star for allocating the time you've protected through strategic inaccessibility. The most common error is confusing your essential contribution with what you're currently doing or what you've been trained to do. Often your current role is merely what you've drifted into, not what you're uniquely positioned to contribute. Another mistake, choosing contribution based on what seems impressive or prestigious, rather than genuine intersection of capability and need. Your essential contribution might be less glamorous than you'd prefer, but it's yours. This analysis often reveals uncomfortable truth. Much of what you currently do is not your essential contribution and could be done by others. Accepting this requires courage. You may discover multiple possible contributions. Resist the urge to pursue all. Your essential contribution should be singular enough that you can direct your protected time toward it with focus. After completing this discovery process, you possess clarity you likely haven't had in years, perhaps ever. You can see specifically what work deserves the time you've been protecting through strategic inaccessibility. The vague sense that you should be doing something important crystallizes into concrete understanding of your unique contribution. This clarity has cascading effects. Decision-making becomes easier, motivation increases, and the burden of constantly trying to do everything lifts. Most importantly, all the earlier chapters, the boundary setting, the filtering, the protected time, now have clear purpose. These aren't techniques for their own sake, but the necessary conditions for making your essential contribution. Chapter 14. The distinction between service and servility. We have confused service with servility, duty with endless accommodation. Genuine service, the kind that changes outcomes, shapes destinies, leaves the world different than you found it, often requires disappointing people. It requires saying no to many so you can say yes fully to the vital few. Servility masquerades as service but actually prevents it. The doctor so busy with administrative meetings that he cannot operate. The teacher so overwhelmed with paperwork that she cannot teach. The leader so scattered across trivial demands that he cannot lead. During the war, I faced constant pressure to visit every embattled city, inspect every military installation, attend every ceremony honoring sacrifice. These weren't frivolous requests, they came from genuine need for morale, for recognition, for leadership presence. I could have spent every day traveling, visiting, appearing. It would have felt like service, but it would have been servility, surrendering to endless demands while abandoning my actual responsibility. Instead, I disappointed many. I visited selectively, spoke carefully, appeared strategically. The rest of my time I spent on work only I could do, strategic decisions with allied leaders, speeches that rallied the nation, coordination of military and political strategy. My selective service appearing rarely but powerfully, focusing my energy on decisions that shaped the war's outcome, contributed far more than universal servility would have. Service asks, "What is my highest contribution?" Servility asks, "What do others want from me?" Service maintains capability for future contribution. Servility depletes capability through present accommodation. Service is strategic. Servility is reactive. When facing any request, ask, "Does fulfilling this request serve my highest contribution? Or does it merely satisfy someone's immediate desire for my attention?" If the latter, it's servility disguised as service. Genuine service requires disappointing those whose requests, while understandable, don't align with your essential contribution. This isn't cruelty, but clarity. The surgeon disappoints the committee that wants her presence so she can save lives in surgery. The teacher disappoints the administrator so she can prepare lessons that transform students. Practice saying, "I cannot do this because I must do that," with that being your essential contribution. Make the choice explicit to yourself and sometimes to others. Monitor whether your activities are building your capacity to contribute or depleting it. Service activities should renew your capability or directly exercise it toward important ends. Servility activities drain capability without meaningful return. Track your energy and capability weekly. Are you becoming more capable, more prepared to contribute decisively? Or are you exhausting yourself on activities that don't build toward anything lasting? Apply the legacy test. Service creates value that outlasts the moment. Servility merely satisfies the immediate demand. At your life's end, service will be remembered and its effects will persist. Servility will be forgotten because it never built anything. When choosing between competing demands, ask, 5 years from now, will it matter that I did this? This clarifies which demands represent service and which represent servility. This week, audit your current commitments through the service-servility lens. List everything you're currently committed to. For each, ask, does this serve my essential contribution or satisfy others' demands? Does this build my capability or deplete it? Will this matter in 5 years? Mark each item, S for genuine service, V for servility, U for unclear. For items marked V, begin extracting yourself. For items marked U, watch for 1 month. For items marked S, protect them zealously. Going forward, apply the service test before accepting new commitments. Does this serve my essential contribution? If no, decline regardless of how the request is framed. When declining, you need not explain elaborately. "I've committed my capacity elsewhere," is sufficient. The primary mistake is using this distinction to justify selfishness or laziness. Genuine service is demanding, often more demanding than servility. If you're choosing comfort over contribution, you're not practicing this principle correctly. Another error, Believing all disappointing of others represents service. Some disappointing is just poor prioritization. Disappointment serves if it frees capacity for essential contribution, not if it merely protects your convenience. Calling civility service is our most common self-deception. We tell ourselves we must attend to every demand out of duty, when actually we're seeking approval or avoiding hard choices about real priorities. After mastering this distinction, you can make choices that previously seemed impossible. You can decline requests from people you respect, can disappoint those you care about, can say no to opportunities that seem valuable, all without crippling guilt. You understand you're not choosing against service, but for genuine service over civility. This reframe is psychologically powerful. Previously, every no felt like shirking duty. Now, every no to servility is a yes to service. Your decision-making becomes clearer because you have moral framework. I am here to serve at my highest level, not to satisfy every demand. You discover that the people you most respect actually appreciate this clarity more than they valued your previous civility. Chapter 15. The Legacy of Guarded Time. At life's end, the accounting is simple. What did you build? What did you change? What mark did you leave that would not have been there without you? These questions are answered not by how accessible you were, how many demands you accommodated, how busy you appeared, but by whether you protected the conditions necessary to make your essential contribution. Consider two men I knew in politics. The first was universally accessible, attended every dinner, answered every letter personally, made himself available to any constituent or colleague who sought him. He was popular, well-liked, constantly busy. He served in Parliament for 30 years and left no lasting mark. Not a single piece of significant legislation, no memorable speech, no contribution that outlived him. The second was notoriously selective with his time. He declined most invitations, maintained distance even from allies, protected long hours for writing and thinking. He was sometimes called aloof, yet his carefully crafted speeches shaped policy for a generation. His writings influenced leaders worldwide. His legislative work on labor reform transformed lives of millions. The difference: the first spent his time being accessible. The second invested his time building something that mattered. Legacy flowed from guarded focus, not scattered availability. What endures after you're gone is never the accommodations you made, the meetings you attended, the trivial requests you satisfied. What endures is the substantive work you built during protected time. When making time allocation decisions, ask, will this exist 50 years from now? If yes, it might be legacy work. If no, it's probably civility that will be forgotten. Lasting impact requires concentrated effort over sustained time. You cannot write a book that matters in fragmented 15-minute sessions. You cannot solve complex problems while constantly interrupted. You cannot build anything of lasting value while accessible to every demand. Track your life's work in terms of projects requiring sustained concentration. If you can't identify such projects currently underway, you're not building legacy. Legacy work carries your name or unmistakable imprint even after you're gone. When someone encounters it, they think, this could only have come from X. Generic contributions, however competent, don't create legacy because they could have come from anyone. Examine your work honestly. Is it distinctively yours, or could anyone reasonably capable have done it? Legacy requires the former. Legacy demands sacrifice of immediate approval, constant visibility, universal accessibility, but it creates something greater, work that outlasts your life and influences people you'll never meet. Examine what you're sacrificing versus what you're creating. If you're sacrificing little and creating little, you're likely avoiding both civility and service. Create your legacy plan. First, identify the 1 to 3 projects that could constitute your enduring contribution. These should be substantial, perhaps a book, a built institution, a solved problem, a raised generation. Second, calculate the protected time each requires. Be realistic about sustained effort needed. Third, map your current time allocation against this requirement. The gap between what legacy requires and what you currently protect reveals your challenge. Fourth, eliminate enough current commitments to close this gap. This is your legacy decision. What will you stop doing so you can build what endures? Fifth, implement protection for legacy work time as rigorously as you protect anything. These hours are non-negotiable. Finally, track progress monthly. Are you actually building toward legacy or merely intending to? Write your obituary as you hope it would read, not what will likely be written based on current trajectory, but what would justify your life. Include the 2 to 3 major accomplishments for which you'd be remembered, the specific impact these had, the distinctive quality that made your contribution unique. Write this in past tense, as if you've died after completing this work. Now compare to your current reality. Are you on track to earn this obituary? If not, what must change? Use the gap between hoped-for legacy and current trajectory to guide radical reallocation of time and energy. This exercise often reveals that current busyness is building toward nothing that would merit mention in any obituary. The greatest error is assuming legacy will happen eventually, that you'll get to important work after handling all urgent demands. If you don't protect time for legacy work now, you won't do it later. Another mistake, confusing legacy with fame or recognition. Legacy is about actual impact that endures, not being remembered. Some of history's greatest contributors were barely recognized in their time. Build it anyway. The point is contribution, not credit. After confronting legacy questions, you gain ultimate clarity about time allocation, the guilt about declining requests, establishing boundaries, protecting time. All of it lifts when you understand these choices enable rather than prevent your highest service. You see your mortality clearly. Time is finite, and what you build with it either endures or vanishes. This perspective makes trivial demands appear truly trivial, and essential work appear truly essential. You stop confusing motion with meaning, busyness with purpose. Most powerfully, you understand that strategic inaccessibility isn't selfishness, but stewardship of the time you've been given, of the capabilities you possess, of the contribution only you can make. You can now live with purpose rather than merely reacting to demands. When you stop being accessible to everything, you become available for the thing that matters. And everything, your influence, your impact, your legacy, transforms. The choice is yours. The transformation begins now.